The La Fonda Hotel, Old Town Santa Fe, is probably the oldest running hotel in the United States. Although rebuilt many times, an early Spanish document shows an inn setting on this spot in 1607. It has changed names and owners many times over the years. At one point in history during the 1800s, what is now the lobby area was at one time the town courtroom. In 1925, it became one of the Railroad Harvey houses, and stayed that way until 1968 when it fell into private ownership. The current owners have owned it since last year, 2014, and have completely remodeled it inside and out. There are several old-time ghost stories, convicts being hanged in the lobby when it was a courtroom, a territorial judge being shot to death in the lobby, and a traveling salesman jumping down what used to be the well is now the fountain inside of the restaurant. These are all old-time legends. According to hotel employees, the only recent activity reported centers around room 272, the scene of a more recent death. What the death was from, nobody seems to know. We didn't take the room because it was an upgrade. It actually sits right behind the La Fonda sign on the main drag. I just said, get us on the same floor and close by. So room 272 is right there, right behind the sign. So they gave us room 288. Not so close by, but it was on the same floor. And man, was this a beautiful room on the inside. They really did a job in remodeling this place.
Look, you wanna go to the lobby?
Look, it's inside.
It's got the Keurig in it, huh?
A Keurig.
And what's that, a refrigerator,
Refrigerator.
Very nice. This is a nice little room, you know. I was surprised. It's got a big screen TV. We've got a sitting area here, which looks out over the Plaza, I believe. I think that's the front out here. Yeah, it sure is. It looks right out over the Plaza. La Fonda Hotel, setting up equipment at 10:10 p.m. Excuse me, at 11:10 p.m. There's now a time difference between here and Las Vegas. On 4/22/2015. This was a good-sized room with an antechamber. Setting up equipment put a distance of about 20 feet between the sensor units. The first sensor went off when I was plugging in the battery for the REM pod. Since the REM pod is a proximity detector and generates its own EMF field, I thought that maybe this is what set it off. Yeah. Come on in, buddy. Both the REM pod and millimeter are proximity devices.
Yeah.
They generate their own EMF field, so like a metal detector, that field has to be broken by another field. The interrupting field must be in close proximity to the device's own electromagnetic field.
The millimeter setting it off.
5 hours later, with all of the equipment set up, we would find that it was not the REM pod nor the millimeter setting it off.
Hey there.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, come on. Ah!
We are just talking about you. Good job.
Both you look right from one end to the other.
Very nice. Very nice. Go ahead. Light it up.
I don't know if they...
Light it up. You're going right from one detector to another. That's very impressive. I didn't think that that the detectors, two different detectors, would pick up like that. Cell sensor's right up there. You did real good there just a minute ago.
Again.
You set that off, and then you turned right around. Set the REM pod off. That's a pretty good little field you got going there. I'm going to say that that's probably 6 feet, but we're going to measure it and find out. Suspecting that the field might be coming from under the floorboards, wiring or something, I put a pillow on the floor with a cell sensor on it to see if that would activate also. Alright, so I moved one of the cell sensor units, setting on the floor directly between the two other units. I'm going to find out if, when this field goes off, you see all three of them there in a row. If that goes off on the floor, then it's an indication it might be coming from downstairs, whatever it is. If not, then it's a free-floating field. Go ahead, set them off again. Go ahead. I got pictures of all of you going off now. And it does appear as though at least it's getting down to the base of the floor, if not coming through the floor itself.
Probably a shop underneath us. We need to go down there and look in the shop and see.
We did, and there was a bank of lighting right underneath us. So I put the tri-field meter down on the pillow to detect electrical fields to see what we could pick up. We've got the tri meter there set on electric. We'll see if it's picking up any electric current coming through the floor. Look at that, no electricity at all. No electrical field means that the magnetic field is not coming from wiring or lighting. It is rare for the proximity detectors, the millimeter or the REM pod, to pick up lighting at all unless it is fluorescent. The next thing to check is if it's RF, radio frequency. The proximity detectors will definitely not pick up RF, but we have to rule it out anyhow. Let's see, we want to see if it will pick anything up on RF. It was a long time in between hits, but when it did go off, it did not register any RF. To be certain that it wasn't the specific location, we began to move the equipment around. Yep, you're way up there. Now I know for certain that it wasn't just inherent to this part of the room.
So you discovered that thing is basically a toy for you to play with. You like the lights? Like the sound that the cell sensor makes? So I'll move around to other parts of the room. Alright, so I moved your toy across the room, way over there in the cabinet. Okay, see if you can find it over there. See if you can play with it over there. That's on the other side of the room from where we kept getting the readings. If you're over there, if you can find that over there, then I know for certain that it is paranormal, that it's following that unit around.
You got it, huh?
So it took you a while, but you did find it, huh? Next, we moved it to the top of the big screen TV. That's about 6.5 to 7 feet off the floor.
Well, you're up there. It's up close to the TV now. See if you can find it. Go get your toy. There it goes.
On it.
Didn't take you very long, did it? Huh?
Yes. Oh, he's got up there.
So now we moved it up on top of the TV. The TV is not on. And it's still going off. It's still able to find it. It basically has regarded this REM pod thing as a toy of some kind. This is amazing that whatever is causing this EMF field can be so expansive that it can come into a room and set off meters in a 20-foot perimeter regardless of frequency response, and then can be so constrictive that it returns and sets off a single meter, doesn't set off any other meters in the room, including a cell sensor unit, which is no more than 6 inches behind it. I know of nothing on this world that has the capability of doing that. As impressive as these findings were, the next day was to outdo it, not only in amplitude of frequency response, but in the mere experience itself, which could be described as nothing less than haunting. Just before 11 that morning, we got up to eat breakfast and to go out to explore a little. The thing about being an investigator is that your days and nights end up being reversed. You spend most of your nighttime running equipment. So the daytime is usually what you consider the nighttime, and we're usually in the room sleeping. We will be during the afternoon anyway. Shortly after leaving the room, the detectors begin to register. As we went in and out of the room during the day, this process would be repetitive. When we were in the room, there would be minimal or no activity, and as soon as we left, the activity level would start picking up.
You gonna go first?
Go ahead.
Where's our light?
Yep, we're here. We're home. Good seeing you again, too.
I have some candies here for you if you want. Right here. Okay? Take it. Be nice. Oh, you're welcome.
Go by the desk and tell them we don't need the room yet.
We don't have
I put a do not disturb sign up there.
It wasn't very long after we left the room that the cell sensor next to the bed started going off. But in this instance, none of the other equipment in the room went off, including the other 3 cell sensors, of which all 3 have their pickup coils aligned to the same orientation. This cell sensor unit would register EMF activity for almost 30 minutes and would stop just a couple of minutes before we came back into the room once again.
We're back.
We're back, guys. Let's change this room. It's too hot up there. Are you still here? You still hanging around in here? Playing with the machines? It'll only be a minute.
This is where our captures began taking on a weird twist. 5 minutes after we leave the room, all of the detectors in the room begin to register, and then they abruptly stop, and the phone in the room starts to ring, which is really odd because we left word with the desk not to be disturbed, so I don't believe it was the desk calling us. We did not tell anyone that we were coming to Santa Fe, New Mexico, let alone checking into the Fonda hotel, and there was no message that was left. We didn't even know that this had happened until after I reviewed the surveillance tape. One or more of the devices would continue to go off until we returned to the room. The surveillance then shows from the footage that as soon as our key card hit the lock, they quit. I said, if you're running equipment on an investigation, you end up being up all night, so you have to sleep during the daytime periods to make up for it. There was so much electronic activity in the room that in order to get some sleep I had to turn all the equipment off, but that didn't stop whatever it was from making contact with us. I have absolutely no idea what that tone was. Kinda sounded like an egg timer. When we got home and listened to the surveillance tape, we went through both of our cell phones, and neither one of our cell phones has a ringtone that sounds anything like that, or any other sounds attached to it. I don't believe it was the clock in the room. It could have been a tone associated with the message light on the telephone, but the message light didn't go on, so we'll never know.
Heard something chime.
Is it yours?
No, it wasn't mine. I've been asleep for an hour.
Once we got up for dinner, I tried to get whatever it was to expand its horizons and give us a little bit more.
Yeah, you found it again, huh? Very nice. Do something. Throw something off of the shelf here. Let me know you're around here.
It didn't take the bait.
You about run the battery down on that again.
About 9 p.m., while we were at dinner, the equipment recorded the strongest electromagnetic interruption that we were able to pick up while on location. We go back and look at it with just a little bit of light enhancement. We can see that it's so strong that it affects some of the cameras in the room. The purplish lines that you see are from the field affecting the CMOS capture chip within the camera itself. I've never heard of this happening. For people that are around my age, when Mom ran the vacuum cleaner while we were watching black and white TV, we'd get these lines across the TV because the TVs had not been degaussed and the vacuum cleaner was not shielded. That's the only frame of reference that I have to compare it to. When we go back and look at this same clip through the eyes of another camera, the camera that is right next to the DVR unit itself, we can see that it's not affected at all, showing that it is not the DVR unit that is being affected, it is the camera. That camera sits atop this cabinet, which is right here. Where that cabinet sits is apparently the direction that the electromagnetic frequency wave was proceeding into the room from. That was a great capture, but certainly not as astounding as what was taking place in the room where the REM pod was at. Again, this clip has been light enhanced. When the EMF field materializes, we see the same type of light disruption. When slowed down to 60% speed, we can see that the anomaly appears in front of the camera with only a couple of lights on the REM pod going off, and then the anomaly disappears as the REM pod comes full on, showing that it has actually moved away from the camera towards the REM pod unit. So, what is this? Well, Jan and I both agreed that if we happen to be playing one of the online Halo games, where you're playing online against opponents, and you happen to come into a room and see this, I'd pretty much say to myself, looks like my opponent either found or bought some kind of cloaking device, and I'd blast away right into it, because I'd know that somewhere he's in there. The only thing is, this is not an online Halo game. This is a 400-year-old hotel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. almost appropriately in the movie Halo Nightfall, a movie made up of live actors and graphic artistry. The actors utilized just such a device to protect themselves from some kind of magnetic-seeking snakes. I'd say that they got it pretty close. An hour's drive away from the Fonda at Los Alamos Laboratories, they have developed a microwave cloaking device. Microwave is not visible light, but it is close to it in the electromagnetic spectrum. We all know by now that the F-117 stealth fighter cloaks itself from radar by its design. And the Polish have just come out with a tank, the PL-01, which is covered with ceramic tiles that adjusts itself to the temperature of the ambient surroundings so that it's cloaked against forward-looking infrared, effectively cloaking it from aircraft using FLIR as a means of detection, which includes us. So cloaking technology is cutting-edge technology for us, and maybe not so much for Mother Nature. I would propose again to my MUFON friends with their eyes glued towards the skies that the reason they're not seeing anything is because something out there has managed to artificially reproduce what is found in nature. The detectors would continue to go off once we returned to the room. At about 1 a.m., I shut all of them off so that we could get some sleep before checkout time. I made an announcement that if it was going to try to make contact with me, it would have to come up with another method. No more than a few seconds after I did so, when I was standing next to the telephone, the message light started to blink, all by itself. Of course, when I checked, there was no message. This would be the final piece of evidence for our capture, and would escalate the experience from a virtual haunting, meaning information that's only picked up through recordable media, to a real-time haunting, meaning that the experience could be discernible to any reasonable and prudent person through one of their 5 senses, whether they were an investigator or not. All things considered, in the end, I wish that we had booked longer in this room and not moved on to our next investigation.
Moron shit. The message light started flashing.
There is message?
No, but the message light just when I was looking at it, just started flashing. So I picked it up, there was no message.
This room in this hotel turned out to be an investigator's dream. What's odd is that the hotel does not seem to be aware of the activity level they have. This is a place where you can check into and get consistent readings which seem to escalate over time. I firmly believe that if we had spent several more days here, we probably would have been able to photograph an apparition or whatever was inside of that cloaked field. The Fonda has an activity level, as far as recorded information, as extreme. This is the highest rating that we've ever given a hotel. That means that findings recovered by recordable media seem to never end, and also seem to be a kind of intelligent response to our requests. As for evidence encountered, meaning that which a reasonable normal person could discern without the use of electronic equipment, we considered it to be moderate and consistent. All of those encounters seem to be limited, however, to the telephone, or at least the nightstand that the telephone was on. The telephone operates on DC voltage, as well as does our equipment. As long as we were in the room, we could not get it to escalate up to the AC level, turn a light on and off, something like that. But there was enough in the room that it could certainly leave some guests scrambling for the front desk, claiming that their room was haunted. And indeed, this structure is haunted.